Hello and welcome everyone to the grand finale of the Angular Spring Camp 2026 series. Yes, you got it right. This is officially the last event from this spring series. So if you've been with us since the very first one in April, that's just amazing. We really appreciate that. We are sending you a virtual high five and you can send us one back on the chat. I'm Krzysztof Skorupka. I will be your host for today's event. And I'm broadcasting live from Warsaw, Poland. And also, as always, we are very curious where you are guys joining from. So please be sure to drop your location in the comments. We will have a look there in a moment. In the meantime, a big shout out to the whole Angular.love crew. Without my colleagues, this event simply would not be possible, so thank you all. We also extend our gratitude to our sponsor for their continuous support, House of Angular. House of Angular is not only a software agency specializing in all things Angular, but this is also a go-to place for high-end Angular consulting and workshops. So, all right, let's see what do we have here and how spread we are today. I see we have some people from Athens, Greece. That's great. We also have a person from Munich. That's very nice. Some places in Poland, like Poznań or Warsaw. So basically where we are streaming from. As always, Adrian from Wrocław. And what do we have here? And also some people from USA, from Geneva. Yeah, that's nice. Denmark, Germany, Macedonia, Canada. That's great. We are really great. I'm really glad to see that there is so many of us. So at this point, I would like to ask you a small favor. So if you are having a good time with us, if you enjoy our events, please take a moment to share the info on your social media, to invite your colleagues, because the more of us, the better. So help us spread the good Angular practices and stuff around the world. All right, so let's have a look at today's agenda. We have three amazing speakers. We will start with Dawid Kostka, who will tell us what's new in Angular 22. Then Dmytro Mezhenskyi will explore the secret life of events in Angular. And finally, David Chasanov give us some AI tips in software development. After each segment, there will be a Q&A session. So this is your personal chance to get your questions answered by Angular experts. So don't be shy. Keep these questions coming throughout the whole event and basically interact with each other. And we'll get to these questions at the end of each presentation. And before each segment, we'll have our usual warm-up, but it will be focused on AI-related topics, so you will get some tips or insights. So yeah, be sure to listen carefully to that as well. All right, so without further delay, let me introduce our first speaker, who is Dawid Kostka. And I hope this is a familiar face to all of you. Dawid is a very active Angular.love community member. He's not only another MC for our meetups, but also participates in many other initiatives. And also he's a mastermind behind the Angular.love newsletter. Welcome on stage, Dawid.
Hi, welcome.
So what's your energy level, like on a scale from 1 to 10 today?
I am super excited since the last week, as finally we got some stable APIs in the Angular, particularly signal forms and resources. So finally, without scare, we can use them in the production.
Yeah, that's definitely a big news. So I'm also excited for that and also excited for your presentation. But before we get to that, let me ask you maybe two questions which are related to the AI. So as you know, we have some AI tools or resources provided by the Angular team, like MCP, Angular skills, or others. So which of them have genuinely improved the workflow for you?
So definitely Angular MCP and Angular skills, like official Angular skills, have been a game changer for me, especially that my AI often thinks that using an effect to override a signal value is a good idea, which it's not. So for example, in that case, is I can use official Angular skills, tell the AI what is a linked signal, and that it should use it. So this is just a simple particular case where I use like official Angular skills. And outside of that, I also use some other MCP tools. So for example, I use the Dolman tools from the Jerome. This is pretty cool, as this allows my AI to understand which AI, like which API is experimental and which is stable. So it doesn't use something that will break like in a few months in the production. Yeah, I also use the Chrome DevTools, and for Angular like related MCP and skills, I think that's pretty much it. Outside of that space, I also tend to use often the GrillMe skill. This one is pretty cool if you haven't seen this. So basically how GrillMe works is that AI agent will ask you a lot of questions about how something should work. So you can answer them, and then it's basically does what you told it to do, as it overflowed you with questions that you answered.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much for this answer. That is a really great set of tools. So I encourage all of you to check them after our meetup. And let me then ask you another question from a little bit different angle. So can you recommend any tools or approaches for improving Angular app debugging with the assistance of AI?
So definitely a good tool in this case that I would recommend to anyone is Chrome DevTools. Chrome DevTools MCP is super duper cool when it comes to live debugging of the application, because like it bridges the gap between your browser and your AI agent, so you can see what network requests have failed, what are the console logs. It can capture the screen of your browser, so it allows it to like get much more data on what's going wrong. And on top of that, you can also use this to like debug memory leaks, or even see how performance like works in your application and what can be improved. So I would definitely recommend the Chrome DevTools, as this is essential tool in debugging your applications.
All right. So thank you for that. And I guess at this point, we can get straight to a presentation. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chris. So as you know, today we'll be discussing the Angular 22 features, but I would like to take a look at this from a little bit different perspective, how we can utilize the modern APIs that has just been stabilized in our production environments, as they are now the recommended way to how we write our Angular applications. So take advantage of the signal forms over the reactive forms as of Angular 22. Before we go to the pre-lecture, I will quickly introduce myself. So I am Dawid Kostka. I'm an active contributor of the Angular.love community. And in case you're reading the newsletter that I make, I'm really proud of you. So basically in this newsletter, I share a lot of knowledge what happened in the community every single month, whether like it's official Angular news, NGRX, NX, or any other library. On top of that, I'm also a developer at the House of Angular company. So let's get started our presentation. And in each slide, you will see in the bottom right corner the particular status of the API that we are discussing and when it was stabilized, added, or updated. So you can know when you can use this API. As I mentioned, I want to go through these changes from a practical example. So we'll create an app. And what this app will do is it will be basically a search center for our Toyota parts. So basically, user is able to input VIN number and the OEM part number, select some part class, and after he clicks the configure button, he will see some results of the parts that he's searching for. So this is pretty simple use case from the daily to day life, where we can use the forms, data fetching, query params, and all things like that. So why don't we get it started? And how we would do this is that we would, of course, scaffold the project with the Angular 22. Note some requirements for the node change, so keep that in mind. What we would do normally is that we would use the ng-new. I personally prefer Tailwind CSS SSR for this particular case. And I also, of course, want to configure AI tools for my configuration of this application. For the UI library, we'll use the Angular material with some dark theme, magenta and violet. And of course, we'll also add official Angular skills into our repository, and we'll configure ng MCP, edit like MCP in our IDE, so we can work better with the Angular itself. Speaking about MCP, in the Angular 22, we got 3 experimental features, but I would say you can safely use them. So these are related to AI agent and how it can start and stop your application. This is super cool, especially that now AI agent can use MCP rather than invoking a commands in your terminal. On top of that, we also got another MCP, which allows AI agent to build your application, inspect the output, so it can, for example, work on the compilation errors in your application. But let's see what's new in our repository that we just created. So it would be definitely a TypeScript version 6 and package log. This is a version of the TypeScript that tries to bridge the gap between TypeScript 5 and TypeScript rewrite in Go, which will be shipped in TypeScript 7. So expect here some default changes from the TypeScript itself, as the strict flag being enabled by default. On top of that, Angular in the version 22 also shipped for the new project template checking by default, so you can catch these small type checking errors that are making your application throw little errors. On top of that, in case you're working with some hobby projects, you no longer have to define your pre-tier configuration in the project, which is super cool, as right now it's there by default, as is the HTTP client in your application since, I believe, last version. But now we also got another change to HTTP client. So basically, it previously used the XHR backend, and now it follows the fetch backend by default. So with fetch function have been deprecated. In case you want to track the progress of individual requests, if your API supports it, you can still use the with XHR function to monitor that. Another change related to SSR, like this fetch change, is that in case you're providing a hydration for your application SSR, it will also provide incremental hydration by default. So in case you work with the SSR and you're migrating to Angular 22, make sure to disable this in case it's not working for you, but in most of the cases, it will just work. Another important change that we get in the Angular 22 is that you can finally have a little fight with the React developers in case of the boilerplate of the components, even in case it doesn't matter right now, as we have AI to generate our boilerplate code. But this particular change matters for juniors, in my opinion, as now the OnPush change detection strategy is the default strategy for creating our applications. That way that people that are learning Angular can follow the best practices. As with this change, we get transitioned from the change strategy default to change strategy eager. So it's basically just a renamed default strategy that you can see in the Angular 22. So let's get started with our application. And we'll create firstly 2 types, available and unavailable, for checking our card part status, and another type for checking the budget of our part, whether it's OM part, quality alternative, or budget alternative. We'll use these 2 types in our car part object that basically describes the part metadata. We're going to start our application by writing the form, of course. So for the fields, we'll firstly have the VIN number as a required field with 17 characters and excluded I, O, and Q letters. Then we'll add OM part number, which is also a required field with a regex pattern, which is following 5 digits followed by a hyphen, followed by a 5 digits or chars. And this field will also have an HTTP validations. On top of that, we'll also add a custom controller, and in case user clicks the configure, we'll redirect it to the results page. So why don't we get started with, oh no, definitely not reactive forms as we are in the Angular 22. So how the signal forms work is that basically we define our model, which is our single source of truth in case of the signal forms. Then on top of that model, we are applying the form function, which basically creates the form mass. So as we have the form, of course, we can apply the validations. And for that, we'll use the required function, which will pass in the form schema function. Note that we can also define the error messages for the required validators or any other validators. So it's super cool that we can reduce the boilerplate in our applications. But as you know, sometimes we need to define custom validators. Let's see how we can compare that from the reactive forms to the signal-based forms. It's super simple, I would say. What we would do is that we would basically define a function which takes firstly the field path from our form and then takes some metadata like length and error message. To trigger the validation, we'll use the validate function in our custom validation function, in which we'll return the error object in case something is invalid, or the null in case the validator has passed successfully. To apply this validator at our individual form level, we can quickly use this in our form schema function, as simple as that. Note that we can also use the validate function inline within our form. So it's a cool feature in case we are having validators that we don't want to share across the application and apply them just to a single field. But sometimes few cases are a little bit more complex. In these cases, we may want to rely on our backend and implement an HTTP validator. So what you would do here is that you would define the response, as you likely know, that we get from the backend. And then you would create the validator. So in signal forms, we can basically start doing that by defining another function, which will take advantage of the validate HTTP function from the signal forms. In this function, you can specify a few parameters, particularly the debounce, so we don't throw our backend with multiple requests on every keystroke. Then we also, in the request field, we define the API URL for our backend. And we have two callbacks here. First one is on success, what should happen in case our validation returned 200 response. We can handle that in this particular case, and again, return null if validation passed, or return an error object in case it failed. In the on-error callback, we can define the error messages based on particular response from the backend itself. So it looks quite simple, I would say, especially that this is an HTTP validator. But what if we want to group these validators to multiple fields in an object form, or a single field that we are using over and over again in our application? So this is definitely where schemas from the signal forms come as a big advantage. So how this works is we would basically create a schema for a given field, in this case, the string field, which would take, again, a schema function where we would define our validators. It's super simple, as you can see here, and to apply this schema across different forms in our application, you would use the apply function, where we pass our field and the schema that we have just created. Just like that, we can share a lot of the logic between different UIs, which is super cool. But this is it when it comes for the TypeScript part. How do we bind the signal forms to an UI? And in the UI, we'll use two directives, form root and form field. So let's start by using the form root directive. And we would basically apply it at the form level. So rest of the individual fields that we are binding by using the form field would know to which form they belong. So as you can see, this is quite simple. We no longer have form group name, form directive, form control. It's just the form field and form group from the form root. So it's super simplified. And also think that it's super simplified with which I personally enjoy, is the error messages configuration. So to display the errors, all we have to do is that we have to define our individual field to a let variable, and then we can use it to access like whether the validation is pending in case of our HTTP validator, or just display the errors by using the for. This is super simple, and I seriously enjoy this new syntax. But how do we submit the form, as binding is one, submitting is the other part? Here's where this form root directive seriously shines. So all we need to do is basically to define a submit button in our form, and Angular by itself will connect this submit button to our form, which we can hook up by using the submission param and the form function. So how this works is basically whenever all of the validation passed in our forms, the Angular will trigger the action in which we can handle what should happen in case our form validation has passed. But in cases the validation do not passes, we can always throw an error to the user so he knows that he should be changing something in the form itself. Of course, this presentation is too short to cover all of the signal forms here, so check out the signal forms documentation. It includes a lot of the examples right here. So I pasted all of like these code blocks and text to the word counter. It gave me up to like 30K words, which is seriously a lot, but don't be scared of it. This documentation is the best in the Angular, in my opinion, so far. There are multiple practical examples, and it's super well structured. But before we go into another topic, let me quickly highlight why you would use the signal forms over template-driven or reactive forms. So for me, first argument that comes to my mind is stronger typing. Believe me, signal forms are typed in the way that we deserve as the Angular developers, and they're pleasant to work with, as the Angular didn't rush with implementing them, and they implemented them also based on the community, like what the community say and the community feedback. So it's something that you should be using. Another cool pro of the signal forms is that all of this API is reactive. So in any cases where you would define like cross-field validation, custom conditional validator states like conditional disable or read-only fields, now it's much more simplified, and all of this is auto-tracked. So you don't have to call update value and validity function manually. On top of that, you also get two extra features. First one of them is that you can forget about control value accessor and all of this like boilerplate code. Just implement one interface with optional properties, and you're hooked up from your custom control to the form. It's super simple, believe me. And we also get support for like validation libraries like Valibot or Zot in a super single function, which is right now super especially important as we're in the era of AI where we are using the Zot to validate the response from the AI. But this is it for the signal forms. Let's take a look at what we have new in our dependency injection system. So we got new decorator, and it's called @service. Basically, what it does is that it's an ergonomic shorthand for the injectable in root, which has some simple behavior on top of that, which basically forces you to use the inject rather than injecting your dependencies via a constructor. You can also use the service at individual road or component level by declaring the auto-provided flag to make this service a locally scoped service. With that in mind, why would you use service and when you would use injectable? So let me highlight that. Injectable from the Angular is believed to be used in more advanced cases in your application, like depending on the providers that use class, use value, etc., or something like micro frontends where you cannot declare the provided in platform in case of the @service decorator. So stick to injectable for more like complex cases, and in case you're just defining a globally singleton service, use there the @service. Another improvement that we get into our dependency injection system and optimization of it is the inject async function. So how it works, it basically allows us to lazy load our optional dependencies in the component. So let's imagine you have an analytics service, or a good example is an UI service which renders something on the screen. So in that case, you would lazy load that particular service by using the inject async. And whenever you would call this function that is returned by the inject async, a fetching of this resource would be triggered. So as you can see here, thanks to the inject async, we are able to save 36 kilobytes just on the mat snack bar service, which is, in my opinion, quite a lot. Note this was taken on the development service, so this benefit is a little bit lesser in the production environment, but it's still good to have this for the optional services. This function is also super cool as this allows you to prefetch the individual services. So imagine you have a case where you're opening a dialog, you're loading some super heavy service in the background, and you want to make sure that it's, for example, prefetched within 3 or 5 seconds since the user opened the dialog. You can use for that on idle with a configurable timeout. And for the inject async, you can also create custom triggers. So it's super scalable solution that allow you to lazy load dependencies in case you're dealing with seriously super complex services. Note that. I wouldn't use this function for CRUD services. It simply doesn't make any sense. Okay, now let's see how we can fetch the data in the Angular 22 and what is recommended. So how I would personally do this in the new applications is that I would first enable with component input binding to easily access data from the router, particularly in our case, the query parameters. Then we would, of course, use the stable resources in the Angular 22. So how this basically works is that we are defining an async resource, in this case, for promise-based code. And in the params function, we are specifying everything that should retrigger the loader function. So in our case, query parameters. The loader function itself, in this case, dispatches a fetch request for the data. And what is the pro of this resource? Why wouldn't I use HTTP client? So definitely a pro of this resource itself is that it reduces your boilerplate code by quite a significant amount. So you have things like status, where you can see what is the status of your request. So it's reloaded, it has local value, it's in progress, etc. You can also access some particular values by using the signals. So you can access value, error, or its loading state. On top of that, you get 3 functions. You can reload the resource in a super simple way, or you can override its value locally. But as you want sometime connect the RxJS and signals together, you may want to use the Rx resource. One example of that can be an HTTP client. So here it works just like a regular resource, but instead of having a loader function, we have a stream function, and it returns an observable. The API is identical to the previous case in case when it comes to the value accessors. So I won't cover more of the Rx resource. Take it it's basically a resource for RxJS. But of course, in the Angular 22, we don't want this much boilerplate code. We want to have much less boilerplate. So this is where HTTP resource come in handy. How it works, basically we define our URL first, our parameters, and everything that we specify in this function for the HTTP resource, where triggers this HTTP resource. We can also here notify, we can pass here anything we pass to the HTTP client, and we can change the response type, as you can see below, to text blob. So we can basically fetch any kind of data with this resource. And why would we, again, use this instead of RxJS? Answer is super simple. It also reduces our boilerplate. So we can easily access headers of our response, the status code, or the progress in case you are using the XHR backend, which is super cool, and it reduces a lot of the boilerplate code in our applications. But let's take a look at how we can implement the UI layer in case of this new Angular version. So here we would definitely use the switch gears merging, which allows us to define the same HTML code for different cases. this is as simple as that, and in my opinion, introduces the code even more. But there are cases like this case in available and unavailable status interface where it may be extended over time. So Angular also helps us here. We can just add default never to take advantage of the exhaustive switch, and whenever we add additional type to this type, we'll be warned, hey, you should implement that. Don't forget about this one. In my opinion, this is super cool, and it allows you to get less errors in your application. So this is also not the end for the templates in the Angular. We get 4 new syntax features in the templates. Right now, we can use the arrow functions, the spread operator, the instance of, and regex for whatever reason you would want to use this one. And you also get some super simple but yet powerful feature, in my opinion, especially in debugging, which is comments. Yes, right now you can comment out individual property of an HTML element, and it wouldn't throw you an error. So imagine you just have to comment a single directive to check and debug your code. It gets much simpler. Note, this is not yet supported by the pre-tier, but you can track the support on this official issue that I linked in this presentation right here. We also are aligning with a TypeScript version in this particular version of the Angular. So basically, previously, in case we used optional chaining operator in our templates, we would get the null by default in case like our optional chaining would return null. Now, as you know, the TypeScript, of course, returns the undefined. So Angular, since the version 22, aligns with this behavior, and it migrates your like null to undefined in the version Angular 22. So make sure to go through all of these like safe navigation migration that can be there in your code after the migration from Angular 21 to Angular 22. But of course, Google is doing a lot of things with the Chrome and AI itself, as you may know. So there is a new, like, let's say, proposition of a standard for the web browsers to how individual applications would communicate with the AI agents embedded into the browsers. So this is basically what WebMCP is, and it's here since the Chrome version 149. So imagine a simple use case. You're coming to this application and you don't want to search the OM part number. You just want AI to find this particular part number for you. So what you would do is just find me this for my car with this VIN number. And then AI would automatically get this part for you and would navigate you to the results page. So how we would implement this in Angular is seriously super simple, in my opinion. Note, this is, of course, experimental in the Angular and in the Chrome itself. So how we would define this is we would firstly put the input schema that we should get from our agents to our code. And we can define here what properties we need, what are their types, and what individual properties do. Then we would define the MCP tool itself. So we provide things like name, what this particular tool does, and how it should work whenever AI agents calls this. So in this case, basically in execute function, we have like context-aware system for dependency injection. So we can inject our dependencies and execute the logic. We would return the like response for our agents in the execute function, so it knows what actually happened by executing this tool. An important thing also to mention here is that you should be validating the inputs from the AI. For example, with the Zot library, as you never know what the AI will return in this particular API, and Angular by itself doesn't check if it's correct along to your schema. So in case we have our tool defined, let's simply provide it in the application globally. So we would here use the provide experimental web MCP tool and pass our tool. And this is all we have to do. It's super simple. But there may be cases where we want to implement such tools for route level. So here we can also use this individual provider function at the route providers with a particular API. And in case you're looking to destroy this provider whenever you leave the route, you can also try experimental API for auto cleaning up the injectors. Note it may break a few things in your application, so definitely check out what this does first before you apply it. But it's a cool way to get this like auto cleaning up mechanism in the Angular 22. But what in case I want to like declare this WebMCP at the service level? I'm not always want to have like this super huge app config. So we can also declare this at the service level constructor. So it would basically be set up whenever the service comes on live. So imagine here a simple analytics service that is lazy loaded into our application by using the inject async. In the constructor, we can just define this tool for AI agent to enable or disable analytics, and that's all we have to do it. In case of the component level, like services provided at the component level, the service will be also auto-destroyed whenever the components get destroyed. So it's super powerful. Just like are the signal forms with this WebMCP API. We can just add this like new property, experimental WebMCP tool to signal forms, describe the MCP name for this form, and what this form does. Register this magic provider, provide experimental WebMCP forms, and this is all we have to do to get WebMCPs running with the signal forms. Isn't this super simple to integrate AI to your application? In my opinion, this is a lot of great work coming from the Angular team. Note we are getting to last thing that has changed in the Angular 22. So basically, a headless component library, Angular ARIA, is now stable, so you can use it safely within your production environment. Therefore, on idle got another feature for the maximum time within a resource should be fetched. So this is super cool, as is the debounce function in the Angular. It's currently experimental, but imagine you have some input from the user, you bind it to the model, and you want to dispatch something in the effect, for example, every 500 milliseconds. Again, so you don't trigger a lot of like traffic in your API. You can use the debounce signal for this one. And in case you're using a Webpack-based builders for building your application, migrate to SBuild as the Webpack builders are deprecated now. And you would also get some much more improvement in terms of speed of building your apps thanks to SBuild. To sum this presentation up, I also want to bring up an important concern. So in case you're using Angular 19, note this version will no longer receive the critical fixes and security patches. So make sure to migrate at least to Angular 20 to get these critical security features. And in case you want to track anything that is going out in the Angular environment, of course, you can track the Google developer experts. These are super like cool guys in this era of AI where there's a lot of fake information, the LinkedIn, Twitter, or even the blog posts. I cannot count how many like false things I've read whenever I was making a research for this presentation. No, selector-less components won't be coming to Angular in this version. Definitely no. Make also sure to check out the official Angular sources. And in case you want to see also a few things outside of the Angular ecosystem, you can subscribe to our newsletter where we define everything that has happened in the official Angular repository, the pull request that has been opened, and also the things that are happening in the ecosystem like NX, NGRX, or any library. So this is pretty much it. Thank you for your attention. Okay, I cannot hear you, Chris.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. That's my bad.
Okay.
Sorry for that. So again, thank you, Dawid, for your great presentation. I really enjoyed it, and I really liked the fact that you touched the topic of this AI slop and all of these fake articles. They are like doing so much harm, I believe, and they are so misleading. So it's good to really point out people to the right resources, right?
Yeah, I often see, especially Jerome or like Jean, who's checking all of these like articles or whatever and posting on the LinkedIn in the comments, no, this is fake, do not follow that. Here's where you can find your official information.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's funny, but yeah, it's never-ending nightmare in terms of this AI where people want to get a lot of followers, but they're making fake content, which is bad in my opinion.
Yeah, unfortunately. All right, so at this point, we will head to our Q&A session. So guys, this is your last chance to ask questions to Dawid, and let me have a look if we already have some. And we do. So in your opinion, which change from Angular 22 will have the biggest impact on existing applications?
I think that depends on the scope, but definitely for writing new features, the resources and signal forms should be what you should be following for writing the new code. As I watched an interview with the Alex where he imagined within like few years, if the community would want it to work like this, the reactive forms may be deprecated. It's of course not something that will happen in the 2 years or something like that, but in the end, the signal forms may be the only like good way to write forms in the Angular. And yeah, this is, in my opinion, the biggest impact. Signal forms and how we fetch the data. It's a lot of changes.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. And I don't see any other comment, but let me maybe follow up on what you said. I also believe the signal forms are a big thing, and you also touched the topic of reactive forms. So maybe let me ask you if you already had a chance maybe to work with signal forms in some of your projects, and even more to combine them with reactive forms, and you have maybe already some insights or experience how these two can cooperate together, and how the migration path could be smoothened.
Yes, so I had some experience with experimenting with the signal forms. I haven't used them, of course, in the production yet, as I'm waiting for Next and other dependencies to get ready for the Angular 22. But from what I could have seen from my experience, is that Angular also take care of this like migration. So basically, they provided you, for example, some utilities, so you can migrate the reactive forms control to a signal form control. And this is super cool that they're like allowing you to migrate to the signal forms slowly. So don't be scared of like big migration, but also always keep in mind like reactive forms will never work like native signal form field. So there are some limitation, but in general, you should be able to migrate slowly from the reactive forms to the signal-based forms.
All right. Thank you for your perspective. And I believe that's it for the questions, but I can tell you that there is a lot of words of appreciation for your presentation. That's just one of them. There is many more comments, and I can only join these people. So thank you very much for spending time with us today, for the great presentation, and hopefully we can see you some future events. So take care, and see you soon.
See you all.
All right, so before we get to the next speaker, I have a quick update from the House of Angular team. So if you want to level up your Angular skills, you might already know that Mateusz Stefańczyk and Fanis Prodremu run some really great open workshops. And they focus mainly around the areas of AI in software development, signals and forms, so things we've been just talking about, and also scalable architecture. So at this point, there are no specific open dates, but new ones are going to be published very soon. So I really encourage you to either go to the House of Angular webpage or just scan the QR code you currently see on your screen. And this will allow you to join the waiting list for these sessions. And there is also a nice bonus the team prepared. So if you join the waiting list, then once the dates are for these sessions are published, the very first 5 people who will book their spots for these workshops will get 50% discount. So I think it's definitely worth dropping your email in there and just keep this on your radar. And also, as a side note, if you are looking for a workshop that is more tailored to the specific needs of your team, your company, that's also an option because the experts run private sessions. So in this case, you can also reach House of Angular team through the website, and then they will definitely help you put a plan together. All right. So with that said, it's time for our next guest. And I believe if you've ever searched for any tutorial on YouTube, which is related to Angular, you almost certainly know this guy. He's a Google developer expert in Angular. He's a great educator and the brain behind the Decoded Frontend channel. So please give a warm welcome to Dmytro Mezhenskyi.
Hey, hello. Hopefully you can see and hear me.
Yes, we can see you, we can hear you. So how's been your day so far?
Hi, Chris. Yeah, everything is awesome. Yeah, the day is great despite the rain outside and pretty grayish environment behind my window. But overall, everything is great. And I hope I will be able to share with you some interesting insights about Angular.
Yeah, I'm really, excited for your talk. Like, this title, The Secret Life of Events, it even brings to me like you are the David Attenborough of Angular. I mean, so that's kind of funny. Really excited for that.
I hope it will not be like a clickbait.
Definitely not. All right, but before we get to your presentation, I would like you to ask you like 2 AI-related questions, as we promised our community. So first will be, when it comes to AI-assisted coding, what do you see the biggest risk for the front-end teams that people aren't really talking about enough? And also, if you maybe see any trends that are currently maybe overhyped on the front-end landscape in relation to the AI.
Mm-hmm. So I think it makes sense to split this question into 2 parts. The first one, what is underestimated, and the second one is what is overestimated. And regarding the underestimated thing, recently I actually found and read about a term that is pretty new, and it is called cognitive depth. Yeah, and this term actually caught my attention, and it describes the kind of erosion of shared understanding across the code base, meaning that the entire team with the time slowly losing their ability to reason about how the system works and what it does. And why it caught my attention, because I had like similar experience working on my pet project earlier before, and I noticed that like the speed I deliver the code is so fast so that my brain cannot fully process it. And despite I delivered this code, I reviewed every single line of this code. After 1 week, I look at it and I kind of see, I realized that it's not my code. It's like it was created by someone else without my control. And I imagined like, okay, in big code bases, it gets even worse. And then I noticed that this problem is not only I noticed, and there were some researchers towards these things. And I think this is one of the things we should keep in mind. And it was at least read about it and be aware of it. And eventually, hopefully, we will find solutions for that. And the second part, what is overestimated? I think it's like vibe coding in context of delivering production-ready applications. Because I don't know what about your like information bubble in LinkedIn, but my news feed is full of stories about someone who vibe coded a production ready application, and like I mean, when I hear in one sentence production ready and vibe coded words, I mean, it sounds foolish to me. I mean, you cannot talk seriously about that. So the vibe coding as a concept of professional software development, I think that's overhyped and it's overestimated. But it's different from AI assistant engineering, I think, and AI assistant coding. I distinguish those two type of software development.
Yeah, that's right. I really like your take on that. And yeah, definitely it's not hard today to generate code with AI, but it's good that we start wondering what happens after, right? What to do with it and so on. Because on the early days, everyone was so hyped with that one, so not much thought was put into this direction.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. And maybe just one more question. So it really relates to what we've just discussed, but as AI gets better and better at generating Angular code, which skills do you think will become more valuable for Angular developers rather than less? And like a side question to this one, if you are planning maybe any related content for your channel, around working with effectively with AI and adapting your development workflows.
Definitely. So I will start answering from the last question. Yes, definitely. I plan content about AI assistant development with Angular. But you mentioned one very important phrase, reliable workflows. And this is something that I currently try to find truly reliable way and reliable processes of AI-assisted coding. And I'm not sure I'm really here. I'm really there. Yeah, there are always a lot of trade-offs and a lot of things that do not work quite well for my particular case. And before I start sharing with the audience something, I have to be sure that it delivers a value. And at this point, I'm not yet ready. So that's why I didn't create any videos about that. But definitely I will start include AI-related topics to my Angular content. That's for sure. But yeah, let's see when it will happen. And sorry, what was the first part of the question? Which skills?
Which skills will be like more valuable for Angular developers with AI taking more and more of just like plain code generation, let's say.
That's a very hard question. I mean, I would be happy if someone else could answer this same question to me, and I would immediately start to develop this skill. I think when this all AI hype is over, I think after that we will get a lot of things to debug. So I think debugging will be one of the key skill that we need to master and apply in real life applications that are, I predict they will be quite messy and hard for humans to read, but we will have to deal with that. And I think debugging skill is one of those skills, and also skill to write skills, because we have this new paradigm skills, and writing skills, it's a skill. It's a separate skill. So Yeah, there are a lot of things to learn. I think the new ones, and pretty hard to predict the future. So yeah, but anyway, that would be my answer.
Yeah, that I can agree that this is hard. I know this is hard question, but we are all trying to figure it out. So that's why asking, and definitely debugging, especially of these production ready applications of vibe coded. So that would definitely be a nightmare.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess without further delay, we can get straight to your presentation. So the floor is yours.
Okay. So, please let me know if if something doesn't work, first of all, because I'm not sure. I think everything is shared. So yeah, let's get started, and let's get started with about talking about events in Angular that, might sound like pretty simple topic, but if you start diving into it, into entire this system and Angular, how Angular process it, this system is actually quite complicated, and I'm here to a little bit clarify it, and I would like to show you how this whole system works under the hood, without diving too much because it's too big topic. But anyway, I think we will find some gems that we will be able to apply in the real life applications. So usually I deliver this talk like offline, and I like to start with a question about the following code. Like, what do you think would be the output of this simple piece of Angular code that we on the daily basis write in our text editors? And since we are not unfortunately the offline event, I cannot hear your answers, but you can type your answers to comments if you want. But I will proceed with the solution, and eventually, after all the magic compilation and other stuff, we will get simple JavaScript, vanilla JavaScript. It will be a simple add event listener attached to certain elements, and our handler will be eventually involved as a handler, right? And this is like very short version of it, but I would like to show you more in details how we go from that part, from the source code to this vanilla JavaScript stuff. And in the next 30 minutes or so, we will have a look at this event setup pipeline. Then we will take a look at the event management plugin system. It is actually the main thing I would like to share with you, but I would like to show you how this system looks within the bigger event management system in Angular, so you see the entire picture. And eventually, I will show you how this everything works in practice, why do we need it, and how you can apply it to your Angular applications. So yeah, let's get started with the event setup pipeline. And quick note before is that you might have a feeling that this is some never-ending story because we will be going through a lot of abstraction layers. But I promise eventually we will reach the final point. And our journey starts from actually compilation phase, because the code we write in our editors, it is different from what will be eventually executed in browser. So it needs the compilation phase, and our templates in components, our component templates after compilation look like this. They are transpiled into a set of small functions that are in context of Ivy Angular renderer. They're called instructions. But the point is that those are functions that do a little piece of work, like create a DOM element, create a text node, or create property binding, etc., etc. And event bindings, they have a dedicated instruction as well, and it is called DOM listener. This is a private function. You cannot use it in your application code. But anyway, so there is such a function, and this function will be involved at the point when the component template is being initialized. So when component is created, the template function is executed, and this DOM listener function will be involved. And now let's follow the call stack and see what happens inside. So inside this function, there will happen a lot of actually things. I dropped most of them because there are a lot of edge cases that needs to be covered. For example, Angular checks if we listen to output, component outputs, or it's a DOM event, and they have to be handled slightly differently. But anyway, eventually, if we have to deal, or if Angular has to deal with DOM event, we will reach this listen to DOM event function. And here happens a few interesting things. The first thing is here. We resolve the component renderer. And the renderer, this is a guy that is responsible for rendering your template. So, I mean, create DOM nodes and apply styles. You probably know renderer, namely renderer 2, and you probably heard about it in the context that you have to never manipulate DOM nodes directly in Angular. You should use a renderer for that. This is outdated recommendation, but it exists, and probably you might know about renderer from there. But we resolve this part, and we also wrap additionally our listener function, so our event handler. And we wrap it, in this wrapper brings actually a couple of useful things. First of all, it automatically marks view as dirty, so you don't have to manually do that if you use OnPush change detection strategy. Yeah, so for event handlers, it makes no sense to call mark for check there because it is done automatically. And also, it wraps everything into a switch case, big switch case, and properly handles errors and delegates the error code errors to global Angular event error handler. So some things to simplify our life. Yeah, they happen here. And after that, we have to go down to the following the call stack, and we have to resolve the target, meaning that we have to resolve the DOM node where the event listener has to be attached to. And then, since we already resolved the renderer, we have everything to delegate the event listener setup to renderer. And this is what a renderer is supposed to do. However, render, this is the first our abstraction layer. Renderer is not really doesn't really do this job of the event listener setup. Instead, it injects so-called event manager. We will talk about it a little bit later. And additionally, it wraps our callback with one more wrapper, and this wrapper brings the behavior, namely when you return false from your event handler, it is equivalent to prevent default. And this is syntaxes sugar that Angular does for you, and this functionality like activated exactly in that line of code. Because in vanilla JavaScript, if you return false from the event listener, it will be just ignored, right? And then when our handler is ready and wrapped with everything that it needs, we delegate the further processing to event manager by calling the add event listener. But inside the manager, again, manager doesn't do exact job. It delegates it to plugins. It is a set of classes you will see later that are responsible for actual event listener setup. But before this setup happens, manager resolves the proper plugin, the plugin that supports the particular event name. And once such a plugin is resolved, then it will be delegated to this plugin, and inside the add event listener of that plugin, there will be executed already the event listener setup using the like native add event listener method. Besides that, there is important method called supports, which helps manager to understand if this particular plugin can handle a certain event, right? And this is what is being called inside the find plugin for method of the manager plugin. And in such a way, Angular knows which event, which plugin can be used for a particular event. So why it is so complex, actually? Well, if we zoom it out a little bit, we can say that every step actually makes sense, because compilation phase, we need to make everything executable in the browser. Listener wrapping layer, we need to bring some additional logic to our event handlers to not do a lot of things manually. The renderer layer is necessary because Angular components, they can be created in different encapsulation modes. For example, the encapsulation none, shadow DOM, emulated encapsulation, view encapsulation modes. And for every of these modes, specific renderer is responsible. Or if you use legacy animations in your component, it will be rendered by a specific renderer too, which knows how to process custom animation events like event start, event done, and so on. Because those events, they are Angular specific, and they have to be processed by animation engine instead of the like regular DOM DOM events, and those things needs to be resolved at this stage. And then we have the event manager layer that is responsible for the final part of the entire work and set up listeners to the DOM elements. But still, like event manager, it's also not a simple simple system. It has not a simple architecture as well. So if we visualize it, we have a manager and the group of plugins that needed for whatever reasons. But what are those reasons? The thing is that we can handle different type of events in Angular. We can handle simple event like key down, click, mouse enter, mouse leave, etc., I consider them as a simple events. And Event Manager delegated to their DOM events plugin, plugin that knows how to work with these simple events. And this plugin is built in, and it handles the vast majority of event bindings in your application. Yeah, most of them are handled by this plugin. But we also can use things like this. So something like hotkeys, and you can do it in Angular without any additional configuration, actually. So if you didn't know that it's possible, yeah, it's possible, and you can use it. It's pretty old feature. And this type of events, like this hotkey event, it will be handled by another key event plugin that knows how to handle exactly this type of events. And it is also built in, and that's why you can use it already now in your applications. And it means, and the cool thing about this everything is that this plugins system is extensible. So it means that we can write our own plugins that can handle our custom events. For example, we can debounce, key down or click events or anything like that. And for that, we can create a dedicated plugin, which we are going to do right now together. So it's time for a quick demo that I prepared. Hopefully you still see it. So here's my demo application. And it's a simple live search. So I can type anything, and I load data from the server based on the user search. And it happens too often, like every time I type something into the input, the data is loaded, which might be not so efficient. So I would like to, for example, debounce the input event. So how we can do that? First of all, we have to agree on the syntax, how the syntax would look like. So here, use your imagination. I will use something like input.debounce. And I want to have something like this. 2 seconds, or maybe I want to define 5 seconds, or I want to maybe define it as milliseconds, like that. But yeah, let's agree on syntax like this. Once you do that, you have to create a plugin and register it. And registration of the plugin happens inside the app.config.ts file. So it's pretty easy to do. You just provide it as a event manager plugins token. It is a multi-provider, so make sure that you use multi-configuration here, and you have to provide a class that contains your custom logic that needs to be executed during the event handling. And I created actually such a class. Here you can see, and we will walk through together and make this current code actually useful. So first of all, what we have to do is to activate this plugin for that our custom event, right? So that's why we have to call this supports method, which receives the event name, and event name will contain actually my entire string here, right? So this is something we will get as an argument, and depending on that, I have to return true or false. And if I return true, it will activate this plugin for me. For that, I use this simple regexp, and it just checks if this debounce substring is present in the string I get. And if it's present, I say that, okay, this plugin knows how to deal with events that contain this string in the event name. And when activation of the plugin happens, we execute the logic right here inside the add event listener. And what we have to do there, we have to actually create event listener for our handler, but we need to bring this additional debouncing logic to our handler. And to achieve that, we first of all would need to split our full event, like input debounce to 2 seconds whatsoever, into the array of values, and then we can assign and resolve from it the original event we actually want to listen to, which is my input, right? Because those things, those are mostly like decorators and configuration stuff, but the original event we want to listen to is the input, right? And this is what we resolve right here. The next step would be to customize our event handler, because this is our handler we define in the component template, right? So this is what we get here, and I wrap it with the debounce function that actually I can show you. It's just simple JavaScript code that simulates the debounce behavior of the RxJS. Of course, you could use RxJS here if you want, but I decided to not overcomplicate things and just created this simple function. And also what I do, I just calculate the duration based on the parameter I get right here. And it also, it's simple, but yet complicated a bit because of this regexp. But the general idea is that it will simply take the string I get here, and it will divide it to the actual time number and the unit that represents seconds, milliseconds, whatsoever. And then I get those values. I can resolve them from the match group. They will be resolved in the following object. I can destructure it, and then based on the unit, I can already resolve the value for that represents milliseconds for the delay represented in milliseconds. Sorry, So if it's a second, we just multiply it to 1,000 and convert it to milliseconds, and then we provide everything to the debounce function, and in such a way we get a debounced event. After that, we have pretty much everything to create our event, our native event listener for the input event, and we provide our wrapped handler, which is eventually our handler that brings the debounce logic. And the last step we have to do is to clean up things, because otherwise we will get a memory leak, and the cleanup logic is executed in the function that the add event listener should return. So I do it like this. I can remove that part, and I simply return remove event listener and provide which exactly listener needs to be removed. As easy as that. What else I could? We can actually check if everything works, right? So we can try to type something. Then you see we have 2 seconds delay, And yeah, nothing happens because I think I didn't save something. Yeah, I forgot to save the app config. So let's try it once again. I type, 2 seconds delay, and then my data is rendered actually. So this is the way you can debounce DOM events. Alternatively, what you can do to simplify things here, you can also use the reference to the manager, to the event manager, that every event manager plugin inherits because you extend the base class. This is what you actually have to do. And it has add event listener, and you can actually delegate the further processing to the manager. And you can provide element, event name, and handler. So let's do that. With the element, so we can provide element. Then we have to provide event name. And the last but not least, it's our wrapped handler, right? So we can provide it like this and simply return this thing like that. And this thing we can remove. And what we did here is actually we wrapped our handler with the additional logic. We brought this debouncing functionality, and then we just propagated it back to the manager and say that, okay, you know, manager, we have such an element to attach the event to. We have the event name. Sorry, we have to provide the original event name. So we have the input event. So you can delegate it to the built-in Angular plugin that handles these simple events. And we have the following wrapper that needs to be executed. So please execute it. And it will set up the handler with our custom handler for that input event, and will care about cleaning up stuff because, yeah, it will be processed by the built-in plugin, and things supposed to work as before. We type 2 seconds, yeah, and everything remains working. So yeah, this is pretty much everything I would like to share. Yeah, there are many use cases where I think it could be useful. So the feature is pretty old, actually, but not well known. And yeah, you can use it in even in old Angular applications if you want. And thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Dmytro, for your talk and for the valuable insights. And I guess we should now jump to our Q&A session. So again, guys, this is your last chance to put your questions to the chat. Let me see if we have anything in there. It seems, oh, there is one. I was just about to say that not yet, but what event-related mistakes most commonly lead to performance issues in larger scale applications?
I think here meant event-related, not only the DOM event, but in general event, like when we get, I don't know, data from HTTP via Rex.js, for example. Yeah, so there might happen a situation when we use RxJS, for example, and quite often we wrongly use the distinct until changed operator, especially when we deal with complex data structures like arrays and objects. And developers often make a mistake that they just compare two objects that are always false, even though they might not change. Yeah. So, and it leads to re-rendering quite often because we get a new object, new reference, and Angular would need to schedule unnecessary change detection cycles. And for that, yeah, we have to compare keys, for example, user IDs or any other key that can help us to distinguish if the object changed or not, or do deep comparison of the object depending on the use case. But yeah, such things can lead to performance degradations. And those are some of I quite often noticed in different code bases. Because sometimes you put the console log in a certain stream, and then you see that it just called, I don't know, dozens of times, and you have unnecessary calls that caused very often by exactly that use case I just described.
All right. Thank you for that. And I don't see any other questions, but maybe let me ask you one more from my side. Actually,
Sure.
Maybe you will find this interesting. So last meetup, I was speaking about zoneless and in general, the changes in the change detection, also in relation to introduction of signals. And I mentioned that something which you also explained in here, that our template-bound event handlers are wrapped in some special, let's say, Angular wrappers that take care of dirty marking the component, right, for us.
Mm-hmm.
So my point was that in case of the signal-based change detection, this, let's say, semi-local one, we do not really want that sometimes, right? Because we are just changing the signal, and this alone can trigger our scheduler, but instead the whole path is marked dirty. And we are wondering if there are any nice patterns maybe we can use, like, reusable, other than like using renderer listen or like RxJS from event, pretty much something reusable, which could be utilized across the app to really opt out of this dirty marking for the components. Maybe you have some thoughts regarding this.
I'm not exactly sure, but I think when I was investigating the source code of Angular in regards of the zoneless, how it works, from what I remember, this trigger caused by the event handler, by involving event handler, will be ignored in zoneless mode. And as you mentioned, when you rely fully on signals, only the signal change causes actually the change detection, and some like other events that are not related to events. And this thing caused by event, they will be simply ignored, and at some point Angular just doesn't just exits the logic inside the change detection scheduler service. I'm actually not sure if it's 100% true, but from what I remember, it was like that.
Okay.
So that's something that works for the zone, for the applications powered by Zone.js, but with zoneless, it's a bit different.
Yeah, so I believe I've checked this some time ago, and it was still there, for the compatibility reasons. But maybe it is like you said, maybe it got updated recently. So I had
because of the compatibility reasons, it's it works pretty complicated way. It's hard to figure out actually how it works there, because there are a lot of branching of how things might be processed. But yeah, if you rely only on signals, things are much easier, and the only trigger mostly is changes inside the signal when you read value inside the from the signal inside the template, and maybe some other rare events that might schedule a change detection. Because now we have a huge list of internal Angular events that trigger change detection, and we don't rely on the asynchronous stuff and Zone.js that intercepts this asynchronous stuff. So yeah.
Definitely the world when only signals are driving our change detection is the place we all want to be.
Yeah.
Okay, Dmytro, thank you very much for being with us today again. And
welcome.
Thank you for your talk, for the Q&A session, and hopefully we can see each other at some future events. And take care, mate.
No problem. Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, and that way we got to our final speaker, and who is actually an engineer working in developer relations team at Google. It is his very first time on Angular.love stage, and we are really thrilled that he found time to hang out with us today and to share some knowledge with our community. So welcome on the stage, Dawid.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Hello, how are you doing today?
Great.
Yeah,
I'm great. Those were some excellent presentations, some tough acts to follow, but even I'm learning a lot as we go. So let's give it up for those first two speakers, huh?
Yeah. And what time is it where you are joining us from today?
It's about 10:30 in the morning.
Oh, okay. So it's early in the morning on your side. It's late evening on our side, but like, yeah, anytime it's good for some cool Angular stuff, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So before we get to your presentation, which is actually about AI stuff itself, right? We would like to have some warm-up questions for you. So the first one would be, has the rise of AI coding assistants influenced how Angular team designs new APIs and features? Because, it's no longer just like developer experience, but also now these agents are also consuming this type of stuff.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So as I was thinking about this myself, and I think it has more of an influence on kind of the experience that we're creating around the API. I mean, it's something that it's not like if we have a new feature idea, we're going to go out and all right, well, how will the models handle this? And that's the first thing we think about, because no, I mean, first and foremost, it's, what's the developer experience? How is this going to impact performance? Like, that is primary, right? But we've got some other tools, right? We've got the web CodeGen scorer, where we can, perform evals and things like that to see actually how the models will handle it. And even if the models don't handle something well because, it's new, hasn't been trained on it, we still have these other tools in our arsenal that we could use in order to kind of assist with AI development. Things like, and I'll get into some of these, but MCP servers, skills, things like that. But we are thinking about it in terms of kind of how do we structure our documentation, what other things do we include in the documentation set that might assist agents and things like that. But I think overall, it's probably in the back of everyone's heads, but it's not like something that is completely directing what we're working on and how we're approaching it.
All right. I really like that, it's still like developers first approach. So that's great. And then let me ask you another question. This will be from the other side. So as we just heard a couple of minutes ago from Dawid, like we got this WebMCP experimental support in Angular 22. So this feels like a significant step, like beyond just, rendering UIs. It now exposes the application capabilities not only to the end users, but also to AI agents. So we've been wondering if we should expect more Angular features like designed, around agent to application interaction, and if you see this like as one of the primary maybe factors or for architectural concerns for the framework.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'll be honest, I don't know the answer to this one. I think, the introduction of these sorts of tools, I think it's really cool because we can create new experiences and we can cater to all sorts of people. I think this can help with accessibility. So I think it's the sort of thing where if we have the opportunity to help folks create better apps, I think that's where we'll invest effort. But it's the sort of thing where, we're, as the Angular team, we're kind of going through this with you all in real time. So, we're just kind of learning about all these new technologies as they come out and these new opportunities. So for us, there's a lot of kind of independent experimentation going on, a lot of cool, tools being cooked up behind the scenes, and kind of really interesting projects I'm seeing from different folks on the team. And, I don't know which of those are going to come to light and which of those are just kind of pet projects. But, I think at the end of the day, everyone's kind of curious and excited about what we could possibly do with these new capabilities. So I probably expect, something, but I don't know what. So I guess we'll all find out together.
Right. I really like that approach. All right, and with that said, I guess we can get directly to your presentation. So the stage is yours.
All right, let's do it. Okay. Sorry, just sharing my screen here. All right. Awesome. Hopefully everybody can see that. So yeah, thank you all for having me so much. So I'm kind of in a unique position right now where I'm working at Google in developer relations, specifically on Angular, obviously, but that affords me a lot of kind of flexibility and freedom to play with tools, to try out new ideas, experiment, and do so in a way where, I'm not personally working on, say a production application that, hundreds of thousands or more users are actually using every day, where I can make mistakes. I can work on example projects and work on greenfield opportunities. And what I'd like to do today is kind of use, my experience to kind of tell you a little bit about what I've learned about how to work with AI, what opportunities there are, and kind of what I'm thinking about. So I'll start with just coding with AI. It's very different when you really kind of commit to it. I know Dmytro was talking about this a little bit in terms of his experience, but it's kind of weird, new, uncomfortable, awesome. I mean, depending on your own experience, you might have had a different experience than someone else. You might love it, you might hate it. And one of the things I've been kind of seeing as a trend is kind of moving towards this agent first design pattern when it comes to coding. And this is a screenshot from Anti-Gravity, which was announced recently by Google. And as you can see here, I do have an open IDE button, but this is definitely not an IDE first type of view. This is an agent-centric view, right? So it's different. And if you were to choose to take this approach, it would take some getting used to, right? And one of the things I've tried to do is experiment with this type of approach in addition to kind of CLIs or working more, from my traditional editor with the help of an agent or something like that. But I think one of the things I've been thinking about recently is when you kind of think about coding with agents in this context, it's really easy to fall into a couple of different traps. And this is a screenshot from a blog post I wrote recently. And just as a heads up, I'm going to provide a lot of pointers and references to other things I've done just to kind of reference concepts. If you're interested in any of these, feel free to go check them out to get a deeper dive. But this was about kind of how I think about just working with AI in general. And I've been really into progression fantasy and kind of RPG-lit novels recently. And two of the books and series I've been reading recently had some sort of like AI. And I was thinking about kind of how they operate with the people who actually take advantage of them. So I'll start on the right. This is from a book called Operation Bounce House by Matt Dinneman, who also is the author of Dungeon Crawler Carl, if anybody is into that. I'm a big fan, but I'm not going to get into the book too much, but there's an AI, it's a robot, and it's in this like dystopian future where they have a farm. The robot runs the farm. They're all dependent on the robot. The robot needs everything. And I think the robot means everything to them. Without the robot, like they're done for, right? And as I'm thinking about this, right, there's this term that's been thrown around a lot lately, cognitive surrender, right? I don't know if other folks have been hearing about this, but it's when you basically kind of just like let the agent do everything and you just accept what they're saying, right? You don't really question it. You just kind of in your terminal, maybe using a agentic CLI, and just kind of hit enter until you get what you want. Very much kind of that vibe coding feel. You're at the mercy of the agent in this case. Now, on the other side, we have a series that I like called Cradle. You don't really need to know much about it, but one of the characters gets it's not technically an AI, it's called a mind spirit, but basically like think of it as an agent that lives inside your brain, but it's not telling you what to do. It's more of a thought partner, someone who works with you. And I think this is kind of the pattern that I've found more success adopting, right? And to give a perfect example, I was working on a project recently, and I was just kind of thinking about this idea, and I ended up just chatting with Gemini on my phone for, I don't know, it's like a few hours, just kind of talking about it, poking holes in my idea. And it was really a back and forth. Like I was talking to a really, really smart friend who knew a lot about this area. So, as you start to think about coding with AI, I would highly encourage you to take this kind of mind spirit approach. And as you do so, here's some kind of tips that I've come across in my own experience. The first one I've kind of talked about a little bit, which is kind of just fleshing out the plan, right? Talk through it. One of the things that I really like to do is instead of just going to an agent and saying, all right, here's an idea I have. Can you write a design doc for me? I'll actually I work with a lot of creative approaches here. So one of the things I'll do is I'll say I have an idea. Tell me why this won't work, right? And you end up coming up with a lot of interesting ideas that way, as opposed to just kind of asking directly for what you want. That kind of goes hand in hand with this next point, which is poke holes early, try to find edge cases. And then once you have the big plan, I've this is very much from my experience and my mistakes too. Like I've had a really in-depth plan and tried to give it to an agent just to see how it would go, and went really well for a while, and then everything just fell apart, right? And I started to look into it to debug. So much code had been written so quickly, I didn't even know where to begin debugging this thing. So I literally just scrapped this entire project and started over. what I found that works better, even though some agents might be capable of doing the whole thing in one shot, is break it into small steps and have very clear success criteria. And that way, you can work on this iteratively, but also if something goes wrong, you have the ability to kind of take a step back and dive in and troubleshoot. And then the last one, and this is something I've been playing around with a little bit recently that's been pretty cool, which is automate the output. And Dmytro talked a little bit about cognitive debt, right? And I've had this too, right? Like if we look at this, this is just a fake, like I was like, hey, make me a fitness tracker, and it generated, 4,000 lines of code. But even if you're not doing something like that with a greenfield application, and you're doing a ton of features all at once, or maybe the agent's working so quickly you can't really follow what they're doing. What I found is you can automate output. So one example is just logging. LLMs are really good at just adding logs at great places that are highly descriptive and easy to follow. In addition to just logging to your console, you can just log those to disk, which is also great because of when things go wrong, then the model has access to the logs that have been written now, and it has a running history of that. And then taking that a step further, one thing I've really been experimenting with lately is after a model, like I created a skill basically where after a model does some sort of big complex change, I'll have it put together a rich HTML document for me that summarizes basically what it changed, where the code lives, some key parts of it, basically my guide to the code base. And this is great for me, but this is also great for teammates if they want to start hopping in. And then it's also great for other agents. If I want to switch agents, switch sessions, all of a sudden I have this document that captures all that text. And it doesn't have to be HTML. It can be, Markdown or simple text file. I personally like the HTML approach because it helps me just visually see everything. So this has been a really cool tool for me to use. But the one thing I will say, when you're actually writing code, I know people have different opinions on that. I really do think if you're working on anything that is important in production, you really should review every single line of code, because agents are so good at solving problems, but they're really good at solving problems to kind of get to a singular objective, right? Like, here is my bug, here is my problem. And this can introduce security vulnerabilities. I'm not going to read through these on the screen, but you can see some examples here of actions LLMs might take in order to solve a problem, not thinking about the broader scope, because sometimes they lack judgment. And to give you an example, like I've been in a situation where I was using a library and there was a bug in my implementation, and rather than try to solve the bug, the LLM's approach was, hey, let me just get rid of your library and rewrite this entire thing from scratch. I was like, no, please don't do that. So it's really important that you review code and review it early, because the longer you wait to review the code, I think those kind of either the cognitive debt, the technical debt, or the mistakes, I find they compound over time, right? So let's talk a little bit about kind of practical tips for agentic engineering, so coding with AI. And I gave a talk at NGConf last year called Architect or Assembler, Your Role in the Future of AI. And one of the things that I talked about was this idea of a context pipeline engineering. And the basic premise here was that you basically want to put together all of the context, provide the agent with all the context you can in order to make it work in its best way for you, to have the best output with the least amount of work for you. And this is composed of a lot of different components, a lot of different parts. And one of which is kind of just context that comes from maybe the team that maintains this particular technology. In our case, we put together we have the Angular MCP server, Model Context Protocol, And this is basically just a way to provide context and tools directly from the Angular team to your agentic coding environment or CLI, just to help it follow best practices. And some of the new ones we've introduced recently are dev server wait to build, which just waits to actually start building, waits to for the build to complete before kind of taking the next step. And that goes hand in hand with two others, devserver.start and devserver.stop. And if you're like me, you might be asking yourself, well, why would I need a kind of an MCP tool to start the dev server, right? Like there is a NGS. It's pretty straightforward, right? I can just start my server that way. And basically, the idea here is that you want to kind of provide a mechanism so that way the agent who's doing the coding has access to the build logs, and it can tell if anything's broken while you're coding. That way you don't have to go back and forth pasting logs from your terminal into the agent to say, hey, this broke, and can you fix it? That sort of thing. So this is all about kind of creating systems to help the AI be highly efficient in generating code and debugging and things like that. And those are just a couple of the newer tools, but there's a lot of different tools that you can find examples, list best practices. So for migrations, my personal favorite, the AI tutor, which teaches you Angular. But and if you want to install it, you just run ng mcp, and that'll give you the configuration to add it to your environment. So, just as a heads up, if these slides look familiar, I borrowed a little bit from Mark's I/O talk, but I'm going to go through them quickly because I have some more kind of context and things I want to share. And then on the other side, we have some Chrome dev tools for agents that are recently. And this is a really cool example. Like if you want to update the homepage of your app to show performance show times and take a screenshot to verify the changes, the Chrome team made these dev tools that make this really easy. So if you were to use this, kind of combine the power of the Angular MCP with these Chrome dev tools for agents, and you have the Angular MCP tool build the application, start the server, and then the dev tools for agents check the browser, take a screenshot, and boom, easy. So here's just like a little video demonstrating that. But there's actually more that you can do with Chrome DevTools than just take screenshots. You can navigate to pages. You can fill out forms. You can check performance and improve performance metrics of your app directly using those tools. You can read console logs. This kind of goes along with what I was saying earlier about kind of automating that pipeline and that process to give the agents context and things like that. This you can see this is successfully took the screenshot and verified. So with that, if you want to actually check these out, here are some links for the Angular MCP and Chrome DevTools for agents. And then the next thing I'll talk about is Angular skills. And if you're not familiar, skills, kind of a different approach to providing agents with context. And this is something that the Angular team released earlier this year. And there's two skills here that I'll talk about: Angular Developer and Angular New App. And the first one, Angular Developer, I mean, this is another way to kind of provide those best practices to agents. And this is really helpful when we think about kind of new features, and kind of relates to one of the questions I was talking about earlier with Chris, where, we're always on this kind of moving cycle of when were the models trained, when are features released, you got to keep up. And it's the sort of thing where there's always this gap in understanding after the model was trained. How do you provide that context to the models so you don't have to keep going back and explaining things? And skills are a great way to do that. But what's cool about skills is they work in this context of progressive disclosure. So the Angular developer skills only, I think, 141 lines. And then what it does is it exposes access to all these other skills specific to features like linked signal and resource and signal forms, where as the model needs it, it'll grab that context so it doesn't pollute your entire context window. The other one I'll talk about is Angular new app, which again, you might be thinking to yourself, well, hello, ng new, that's pretty easy. But maybe you're new to Angular, maybe getting your environment set up is more of a challenge for you. So this is a good one to help you get started from that perspective. And then for all of you contributors out there, we've got some contributor skills that can really come in handy. So you can start using Angular skills today, but I would also encourage you to use your own skills today, right? So we're kind of at the point where the agents are getting really good, to the point where a lot of the commodity work, I'll call it, you might want to do could be kind of automated, right? Let's say you have a component that you want to create, or a set of components, and they all follow your team's kind of design standards, best practices. This is all something that you can bake into a skill, right? And that way, instead of just writing boilerplate, if you know exactly how it's going to turn out, you know exactly what comments are going to come up on the PR, you can get past that with a simple prompt. And it doesn't even have to necessarily be an official skill. Like, skills are just prompts. You could just keep this in a text file in your directory that you share with other folks, and use it to just kind of automate and expedite a lot of the things that you're doing, just to make your own life easier. And then you're not just limited to skills. You can also build tools to do different things. And I think this is where kind of vibe coding actually has a home, is a good fit. So I know there's a lot of negative connotation around vibe coding, but I think there's a place for it. And I'll give you a perfect example. So one of the folks on our team was actually vibe coded a tool to triage a bunch of GitHub issues on the Angular repository. And he basically vibe coded this tool, and then created some agentic flows to help him out, and was able to kind of bang through, I don't know, a few hundred issues way faster than he would have before. And I hope that kind of illustrates an important point for you, which is if you want to vibe code, or you want to kind of use an agent for coding and not necessarily check their work, it really depends on what the code's being used for, right? If this is a tool to help you do a one-off task, go for it. You don't need to know if the code is good, right? You're the only one using it, and it's, you might only use it once, right? But if you're, rolling something into production, well, that's kind of a different story, because there are actual business implications involved there. So in that case, you actually want to review everything. You want to make sure it's scalable, maintainable. But if you're just, running a script, or writing a script, or making a tool, by all means, vibe code. And I think that's one of the things I want to help folks understand, is kind of how to use different tools and when to use them. Because a lot of this, at least for me, a lot of my experiences just come from experimentation, and really just kind of getting reps and understanding where the strengths and weaknesses of these different approaches are. And if you do want to vibe code with Angular, you've got a bunch of different options, like just the Gemini web app, and you could also use Google AI Studio by just selecting your framework like that. Here's an idea. But I want to get into some other kind of interesting topics here too. Not just how to write code, but what is the future of apps, right? Because with AI, we now have so many new opportunities to kind of create experiences that seemed, I don't know, magical or impossible before. And as the simplest example, this is from a live stream I did early last year, where I just created an interactive choose your own adventure graphic novel builder. And I know this is kind of a contrived example, unless you are a graphic novel company or something, I don't know why you need this, but I hope this does illustrate a lot of different kind of points where you can build experiences for people that seem magical in the context of your app and your business. And it's pretty easy to do that. I mean, using this app used GenKit and with resource, this is a nice little pattern to kind of just generate different content. And I know Mark also did a video, I think, using Vertex AI to demonstrate some of these different concepts as well. But it goes further than just kind of generating images or generating text. You can now generate an entire user interface. So I don't know if folks have heard of A2UI or AGUI, but basically A2UI is a protocol for describing interfaces, where one agent can receive a request of what a user wants, turn around and give you basically a description that can be turned into a user interface on the fly that exactly kind of answers what the user is looking for. And this, as you can imagine, there are a lot of use cases for this. There are a lot of times this isn't the right approach, right? Static pages, things like that. Like, a lot of people expect deterministic flows, but as you think about your application, might there be an opportunity to kind of create some dynamic experiences that are really useful for folks? And if we take that a step further, let's kind of broaden our thinking a little bit, right? I think a lot of how people interact with the internet at large is going to change. Not saying that folks are going to abandon the browser by any means, because I don't see that happening. But I think folks will spend more time inside of AI applications, like the Gemini app, for example, where you might want to ask a question, and instead of just getting a text answer, what you'll start to see is via kind of MCP, you can actually deliver a component to, and I think one of the great examples I've seen is like booking a flight, where now the card from your flight can actually be put directly into the chat, that you can interact with it. So maybe a lot of the web is actually pulled into these agentic experiences, where you can kind of experience somebody's application in different places. So it's kind of a different way to think about these things. And if you are interested in this, there's an Angular specific renderer that you can use to make this really easy to integrate with Angular. And then there's in partnership, so Copilot Kit built this A2UI widget builder that you can use to easily kind of build these different kind of cards that you can use. And I hope this better illustrates kind of what I was talking about. And this will give you a lot of the different building blocks you need in order to use A2UI. And just to kind of give an example, like here's an app that I built for fun. So I just had this kind of very, very basic demo sales pipeline spreadsheet here. So I built an app, like a fake Google Doc app called HyperDoc, where basically what I did was I just said, all right, turn this into an app. And it used A2UI to just, on its own, come up with this cool dashboard for me, which I thought was pretty cool. And then, I can give additional, context. I say, add a title, analyze the data, give me an executive summary. And it does cool things like this. So, there's a lot of opportunities out there, a lot of ideas. I think it's, you're really kind of only constrained by your own creativity. And, you're not just limited to that. I actually did a talk last November where I built my own version of this, where I kind of rendered a custom website, custom web app with my own, of my own choosing. Like, I spun this up myself. So, if this is interesting to you, check it out. I think if A2UI might be a little confusing for you, this might be a good way to kind of understand conceptually how things work, but just something to check out. And then one thing we talked about already, WebMCP. So, it's an emerging but experimental web standard to expose structured tools directly to agents. And I talked about this a little already, but I think there are some really exciting opportunities here. But I think the big takeaway is, think about the future of how people might interact with your apps, where they might interact with them, how, that's all changing. And, start thinking of creative solutions, like things you can do to make your own experience better. And also, think about what if you pair up WebMCP with A2UI? That's a pretty cool and powerful combination. So the last thing I'll do is, and I think this was actually a question to Dmytro, like, what should you focus on? So this is another slide from my NGConf talk, and it was when I talked about it then, it was who's going to be successful. But I think I'd like to kind of rephrase it into what skills I think are the most valuable. So one is deep technical expertise. And this might be kind of counterintuitive to some folks because you're thinking, oh, well, the models are so capable, they're doing so much. Like, why do I, need to keep learning? Well, I think this is actually one of the most important things you could do is just keep learning, keep developing that super deep technical expertise. It'll make you way more efficient when working with LLMs because you know what to ask for, how to ask for it. B, you can review code and make sure you're not introducing bad design patterns, things that aren't maintainable, security risks for sure. And then C, when debugging and troubleshooting, I've admittedly been in a hole where I just keep asking the agent to try to figure it out, but sometimes it works, but a lot of times your expertise is truly required in order to solve a problem. So it's really important that you keep building that deep technical expertise. Another kind of area that I would encourage folks to do, another thing I would encourage folks to do is really kind of expand your horizons. One of the cool things about AI is you can kind of get into new technologies really easily, right? And I've heard some people say, if you're a bad coder without AI, like AI is just going to make you worse, right? Because you're just going to be slinging all of this AI slop into your code base. But honestly, when I think about it, anytime I've learned a new technology, like I've always sucked when I started. My code was terrible. If I look at my early Angular code when I first ever started using Angular, it was horrible, probably. We've all been there where our code was bad. And I personally feel like I've gone through this, whenever I'm learning something, I go through this like 3-step phase where maybe it's a new technology or framework where the first time I learned something, maybe I'm watching a tutorial and I just put the line in and this line does X. I'm like, cool, this line does X. I understand. And then I want to have some sort of slight customization. So I go from, all right, how do I go from, I understand this line does X, but I don't know why. Well, then I start understanding some of the parameters, some of the options. Like, okay, I have a slightly better understanding of what this does. And then something goes horribly wrong. And I have to dive through the documentation, maybe the source code, and I really gain a deep understanding of whatever that concept is, that API, that interface. And it's at that point that I really kind of gain that expertise. And the thing is, if you're willing to put in the work and you're willing to learn and not just let AI do all of the work, like Roger in the example I was giving earlier, you can go through that process much, much faster, and you can learn really, really quickly. And we're kind of at the point where you can start using the right tool for the job more often. So I would encourage folks to kind of expand your horizons, try new technologies, see what you can do, because it'll just make you a better professional as an engineer. And then finally, context pipeline engineering. Folks who really understand how to provide context to LLMs in an efficient way, but also in an automated way, right? One of the things I was reading about recently, loop engineering, where folks are saying, oh, you don't have to write prompts anymore. you shouldn't be prompting anymore. You should be writing loops that have the agents, just work towards a goal, and they'll figure out the prompt themselves. And that's something I'll probably experiment with myself. But at the end of the day, I don't write most of my really complex pop prompts. I don't write myself. It's usually a discussion that I have with my agent, and then I'll talk to Gemini for a while, 30 minutes, and then I'll say, okay, I think you kind of understand my problem space. Write the prompts, or analyze my code base to understand all of the things that my team does kind of uniquely. Put that into a skill. I think the folks that understand that will be really successful. And if you kind of just don't surrender your thinking and your critical thinking abilities to AI, and you actually use it as a tool to make yourself better and adopt these skill sets, I think that's really where you'll find success. So with all that, I hope this talk has given you a lot to think about, some tools to kind of help you code more efficiently, some inspiration, some ideas. But thank you. I want to thank you all for having me and for spending your time with me. Really appreciate it. And thank you.
Yeah, thank you, David. I think that your presentation was really great. You packed so much knowledge and insights into such a short amount of time. Just wow, we are really happy having you here with us today. And now let's see if we have maybe any questions for our Q&A. And I see there are some. So the first one is, do you perform any kind of tests how Angular is working with certain agents? I mean, how that code is generated. As an example, using Angular leads to reducing the token usage.
Yeah, this is a great question. I think the web code gen score that I referenced earlier is a great tool for this sort of thing, because you can kind of customize what agent is actually performing the code generation. And I'm pretty sure it gives you, I don't know, not positive, but I'm pretty sure it gives you token usage and things like that as well, that you can use for your evaluation. And it's not even, folks are working with other technologies. It's not even specific to Angular. You can use other, web frameworks too.
Mm-hmm. All right. And the other one, this is interesting. What examples of AI adoption in the web applications have surprised you the most over the past year?
Ooh, examples of AI adoption. Surprised me. I don't know that I've had so many that have surprised me. I've had some impressive experiences where I was just kind of blown away by kind of how folks kind of made such a clean integration. I think what's been really kind of, I don't know if it's called surprising, but interesting, were some of the kind of announcements at I/O recently about how web apps are kind of being generated on the fly inside of Search and inside of Gemini. And I think that kind of points to a broader trend we might see, which is kind of short-lived ephemeral applications. And this is something I didn't really touch on, but I think the way that we're going to experience the web is going to fundamentally change in a lot of ways. Like, you might have some apps that are just short-term, one-time use. You might have some apps that are long-term use, and I think that's really interesting to me, just kind of how things are going to evolve. But really, really good question.
All right, and I believe that was the last question for our Q&A session. So again, thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you for your presentation. And yeah, hopefully maybe we can see each other at some future events. So looking forward to this.
Absolutely. Thanks again for having me.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
All right, take care.
All right, and that was the last presentation of the day and the last meetup in this Spring Camp edition. But before you go, there are 3 final reminders. So first of all, if you missed anything from our today's sessions, don't worry. We have you covered. So you will find all of the recordings on our YouTube channel. You will also get direct links to your mailbox. The second thing is a reminder about the Angular workshops. Again, no open specific dates as of now, but I really encourage you to join the waiting list and make use of this great bonus of 50% discount once they will be published. And last but not least, please remember to follow us on the social media. And also, if you enjoyed Dawid's today's presentation and you would like to see more content like this, and maybe you are not yet subscribing to our newsletter for some reason, then be sure to correct that, subscribe now, and keep yourself up to date with the greatest Angular stuff and the newest tips, events, and updates. And yeah, I believe we will see each other this autumn again. And until then, stay curious, keep coding, and see you soon.